I'd like to welcome everybody to our 4th annual Broker Forwarder Benchmark Study webinar. Thanks for the participation from all those that have registered. Really had great feedback this year, and we are well into the triple digits in registration, so do want to welcome everybody. And today we are doing a webinar, talk about what is happening in the broker forwarder industry, talk about a benchmark study that we had done along with the Air Forwarders Association a few months back, and really great feedback from the community. And it's really interesting now as we see that we have 4 years or so worth of data from this type of platform of getting back this feedback from you, the folks that are in the industry, and we can now start comparing year over year a lot of great data. So we're really excited to have this forum. It was a great success when we did this face-to-face at our Evolution Conference in Naples, Florida in March. But to have this forum as a much broader audience, an ability to have some really interactive Q&A within the session through the chat box, and to be able to reuse this and to be able to distribute this content later is something that we're really, really excited about. So today we have, along with myself, Glenn Palanaki, I'm a director here at Descartes in our industry strategy group, as we look to point our direction, our portfolio in the right direction, as we see industry trends, as we do this kind of analysis of the industry. Where do we as Descartes want to be? That's part of some of my responsibilities of my role, but I'm excited to share that we also have Brandon Freed, who was with us at Evolution, and we presented together. So Brandon is from he's the executive director at the Air Forwarders Association, and he's done this with us for many years. That's because of his wealth of industry knowledge, and you've probably seen him if you do the circuit, like many of the registrants do, through the many conferences. He is well known in the industry, and he has gladly accepted, and we're thankful for that, that he's accepted to present this today with us. So without further ado, I'd like to just do a little bit of housekeeping, if you don't mind. So we are showing the slides on the webinar, plus there is audio. So if you don't hear the audio and you have seen the slide change, it's a little bit pointless for me to say turn the sound up, but the sound will come through your computer speakers if everything is configured correctly. So I know it's a bit pointless, though, if you can't hear me that I just said that, but do want to do it for posterity's sake. We will publish a recording after the web seminar, and throughout this platform and throughout this next 45 minutes to an hour, if you do have questions, go ahead and put them into the Q&A box, and myself and Brandon, we will try as best as we can to answer it in the Q&A section at the very end of the presentation. And if we don't get to your question, we really apologize. Some webinars, they come fast and furious, so we don't get a chance because we want to respect everybody's time, or the question is a bit complex in terms of maybe we need to do a little research or some vetting on our side. So we will answer all the questions, though, that we get, but feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and then Brandon and I will do our best to answer all the questions at the end. So we will be breaking this webinar up into 4 sections. And the key is that we want to establish, well, who are we talking about? Who did we survey? Who responded? And that's, of course, key, because we want to make sure that if you're listening in on the webinar, we want you to have the confidence to know, okay, some of these things that I've heard, they really do matter to me. Why? Because I'm in that industry, or I'm in that mode of transport. You know, we want to make sure that we establish, well, who did we survey? How many did we survey? What industries they're in. Then we'll move to key trends and practices that Brandon will take over, and he'll guide us through that section of what we're hearing from the industry. What have you told us is on your radar? What does it mean to be successful? What are you doing to be successful? What are you strategically planning to do? That would be in our 3rd section, so under the strategies and tactics. What's keeping you up at night? And what's making you excited? There is an entire section there, and Brandon will also do that. So he will do sections 2 and 3, And then because technology is such a big part of what comes back to us in every year has been consistent about how much technology matters to this group, especially as you formulate your strategies and you tactically approach business problems, turning those problems into opportunities. What does technology mean to address those and to really take that challenge and make it into an opportunity? So I'll take over that section then at the end, and then we will do some Q&A. So first section here, who did we survey? So we surveyed a large group of broker forwarders. So we had 216 participants. That is a big jump year over year, a big jump from what we had in 2018. So you can see we have international forwarders, we have domestic forwarders, and for this case, let's say domestic forwarders are in the North American market. We have NVOCCs and we have customs brokers, so a pretty wide range. So when we say broker forwarder, this is who we're talking about in terms of who responded, a really nice wide range of service providers that are not only in air and ocean, but they're also in rail and truck. They're at the bottom right. So when you imagine a service provider, most of the ones that you would drive by or most of the ones that you've done business with, they are really a candidate when we say of who were the 216 participants, so a really wide range. So what locales, going to the bottom left, a large amount of participants that responded have U.S. operations in Canada, so North America is represented pretty heavily there, going from left to right. And then we have, I would say, a nice balanced representation from Europe, Asia, Latin America, Middle East, and Australia. So thank you to everybody that responded. I know Brandon pushed out some of this information through his Air Forwarders Association. We as Descartes did as well. We really want to thank all of you that replied to the benchmark survey this year. So continuing on, another cut of the data, and this is what you will now see. The next two slides are really going to establish a lot what Brandon is going to show in terms of the questions and their responses. So because there is such a vast number of responses, we wanted to see, well, what are the responses telling us from who was the respondent? So in this case, the first cut of data, we looked at, well, what is the financial performance? And now this isn't something that we as Descartes or Brandon as the Air Forwarders Association looked into your financials and then judged whoever responded. No, this is self-reported profit margin. So we're relying on you for this. This is nothing that we are injecting in terms of data scrubbing or value from the respondents. This is what you have self-reported to us. So the key is that we do see a lot. I'll start in the middle and then go from side to side. So we do see a lot in that 3% to 10% profit margin. So a lot of the respondents are falling into that category, saying, well, I'm not losing a ton of money, or the respondents, it isn't a bulk of people that are struggling in the industry. It's a bulk of people who are doing well, but at the same time not doing overly well that they can take a lot of risk. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Or others that are struggling that can't take some risk. So it's a real healthy balance. But we do, now moving to the right, we do have a lot of what we have categorized as top performers. That means a greater than 11% profit margin, again, self-reported. So we will show you data based on something that we will call top performers. So that means greater than 11% profit margin. And then now moving a little bit to the left, those that are categorized as bottom performers. And in 2018 and 2019, we are just categorizing that as less than 3% profit margin. And previous years, you can see here in 2016 and 17, there was a little bit more breaking about losing money or just breaking even. So this year, last year and this year, we've moved forward with this concept of there's really then these three buckets: bottom performers, you have your middle section, then top performers. So we've taken that cut of data and we'll apply that to a lot of the responses, or many of the responses, going forward. Another cut of the data, so not only just from a financial standpoint, so that you will see repeated. The second one that we put a large focus on is, well, what is your size? So we've said in the next But as you see the responses, you'll see something that we'll call small and large. So what does that mean? So this is reported, or again, self-reported by companies that said this is how many shipments, or this is how many transactions. I know that's a bit of a nebulous term, and it means something different to other people. But in the self-reported way, we're considering small as less than 10,000 shipments and large as more than 100,000 shipments. So those two slices of data, the financial side, if it's a bottom performer or a top performer, which you saw on the previous slide, or whether it's a small-sized organization or a large-sized organization, that's the lens that we will be applying a lot of the next answers that came back from the benchmark survey. So Brandon, I'm going to hand it over to you as now we turn our focus on the key trends and practices.
Great. Well, thanks, Glenn, and thank you once again for the opportunity for the Air Forwarders Association to participate in this very valuable survey. It's a lot of very great information. So why don't we get right into these key trends, as you said. As we look at the slide here, I'll tell you that forwarders have historically thrived on change. And we're nothing, if we're nothing, we are adaptable to change. And of course, this slide kind of reflects that. There's global instability out there, and those are factors in this slide. We're more leveraged for China to the bottom of forwarders. But, right now, people in our business are concerned about U.S. trade and security policies. There's no doubt the current administration is having an impact, I think an unprecedented impact, actually. But you see from the top and bottom performers, global instability is a concern. The Chinese economy, less so for the top performers. The bottom performers, as I said, are probably more concerned. Price of oil has gone down. It's a concern, but not that much of a concern. And I'll tell you, Glenn, what's interesting here is that a couple of years ago, we were very concerned about reshoring, and look, it hardly has an impact. So right now, that's not where the people are worried. They're more concerned about what's going on with U.S. trade policy and global instability. So interesting information there. As we go over to the regulatory or industry change, commoditization in our business is always an issue. And for the bottom performers as well as the top performers, of course, pricing pressure is an issue. But we're seeing now that customers are looking for visibility, shipment transparency. They want to know what's going on. I don't know whether they actually want to see how the sausage is being made, but I think they want to know where their shipments are, where when they're going to arrive, and they want this in as close to real time as they can get it. We're seeing that everywhere. The bottom performers, by the way, are starting to get more inquiries about that type of visibility, that transparency. Cargo security declarations. Yeah, that's going to have an impact over the next 5 years. They're concerned about that. The e-commerce service requirements, the bottom performers are now starting to realize that it could have a great impact. And then we're going to see this throughout the survey itself. These results is talent recruitment is going to have a big impact, and the top performers are concerned about that because that for them is a significant barrier, not so much for the bottom performers. And then, of course, truck carrier capacity, bottom performers are a little more concerned than the top performers, but it is up there as a concern overall. But I think that the most significant barometer here or indicator we have to look at is talent recruitment. And I also think that these bottom performers are asked to do more for their clients, and I think we see that here. As we go to the e-commerce impact, we look at this instead of top and bottom performer, it's more small and large here, and more real-time shipment tracking and automated business processes. The question is, how are B2B and B2C e-commerce customers impacting the forwarding and brokerage industry? And we're seeing there, again, automation is important, especially in terms of the business processes. Direct to customer, that's obviously, business to consumer, that's another big area. The shorter lead times and faster reaction to order changes, the large forwarders are seeing that as something happening or something to be concerned about as time goes on. International capabilities, again, the large forwarders are looking at that as something, as an impact coming. And the smaller forwarders don't seem as much of an e-commerce impact as the larger forwarders. Larger forwarders are starting to play more in the e-commerce game. That's not absolute. I mean, we have smaller forwarders jumping into it as well, but it's all about visibility, and we talked about that earlier. And I think that the administration threatening to pull out of the Union of Postal Union, Union of Postal Unions, which is a worldwide group, over costs is going to have an impact here. And I think that this e-commerce surge, direct to consumer, is something that forwarders need to have. They got to figure out their way on how they're going to participate there, if in fact they even want to. So we'll see. And of course, obviously, security is an issue as well. As far as trade services is concerned, forwarders are being asked to provide more services. And, you have to ask yourself a question if you're in the freight forwarding business. Is that good or bad? So to a lot of forwarders, it's an opportunity to shine. It's an opportunity to show their customers that they can rise to the circumstances. So with the spate of tariff changes underway, which of these global trade-related services are customers requesting from your organization? Well, we're starting to see now that, as an example, the duty analysis service predict new or potential tariff change impact. The bottom performers are starting to see more requests from forwarders, who want to know what these tariffs are, how they're going to be impacted by them. And by the way, we saw recently we got 25% tariffs beginning tomorrow. So, I'm sure customers want to know more about that. They want to know. They want help with their HTS classification, the harmonized tariff classification services. Again, customers are coming to the freight forwarders for information. Sourcing services to find suppliers in countries with more favorable tariff rates. It's kind of even there, but it's something that the forwarders are seeing. And in terms of customers not involving the forwarders in their digital trade strategies and services, we're seeing the gamut there. The top forwarders are seeing that their customers are taking matters into their own hands, not so much the larger or the smaller forwarders. Newest supplier risk assessments, as an example, denied or restricted parties. Not so much a concern, but still there, and the bottom performers are in fact seeing a rise, and they're getting more concerned about that. So I think that this is the first time we've taken this question. Glenn, I think this is the first time we've had this kind of question. Is that correct? You with me?
Yeah, I believe so.
Good, good. I know you were on mute there, but I'm pretty sure. So I think, you know, one of the things that forwarders need to realize here is, and you know, you're being asked to do more, and why this is, it's a good question, but I would say that it's about value to the customer. But I invite the audience to contribute there as well. But it's still an interesting slide. In terms of competitive advantage, well, you know, the top and bottom performers, you know, what is your greatest competitive advantage? High service. Yeah, that's still one of the most significant responses. Almost neck to neck. The top performers a little more than the bottom performers. But tailoring services designed for individual customer needs. The top performers see that as a little bit more of a competitive advantage, but it's top between both of them. Domain expertise. I think the bottom performers tend to be a little more niche oriented. So you know, obviously this wasn't as significant as the preceding two responses, but I think that domain expertise is still an area, and the bottom performers tend to be more niche oriented. Low cost, you know, everyone is pretty much, the fat's been taken out of the business at this point in time, and so I don't think cost is as significant. Maybe a slight advantage goes in that question to the bottom performers. Technology, everyone kind of has technology right now. We're not technology Neanderthals in this business. You know, we've been around technology for a long time, and there are both the large and small, or the top and bottom performers are investing in it. Trade lane performance, a little bit more slanted to the bottom performers, but I think that you know what you do. It's what you do that makes you unique and better than your competitors. And of course, I think this slide shows us that service is absolutely king. I do go back on that on the low cost side because low cost is a little bit lower, shockingly low actually if you look at it. But we talk about that all the time. And I think what we're seeing now is the top performers are adding tailored services, and technology is allowing them to do it. So you know, it's the most successful players have thrived on tailored versus cookie cutter solutions. And I think that's why forwarders are there. It's not just, you know, everything fits in the same mold. Forwarders are there to provide customized creative logistics solutions. And I think that's part of the slide. In terms of the competition, this is interesting because it provides us you know, it's what you know about your competition causes you the most pain. And you know, we're looking here, if you look at 2019's figures, you know, what are your greatest competitors today? Well, it's forwarders or brokers like me. And that's what people are seeing more so now than ever before. And what's interesting here, looking back in 2017, you know, you saw that large integrated logistics companies and you know, like the FedExes, DHLs, and you know, the UPSs, that used to be a big concern. Not so much this year. It's actually folks like us. So 2016 and 2019 are almost identical. So it's kind of like we're going back to the future. So 2017 it was the integrators, 2018 was the global forwarder, but now we're going back to it the way it was. So top performers tend to be bigger customers, so the integrators are the more natural competition there. On the competitor's advantage, the question here was, what is the competition doing that you wish you did year on year, 2018 versus 2019? And last year it was shipment visibility. That's dropped a little bit. But that's not surprising. It's still a big concern. More global operations. compared to the integrators. I think that's always a concern. Value-added services, again, it covers 3 of the top 4, and it's something that all companies want to provide. More value, the better. Deep customer domain expertise. It's less important this year as it was last year. A lot of people just don't, as you see this year, they're not really sure. You see that year over year. Providing multimodal forwarding and brokerage services. This year more than ever, they want that as well. And of course, serving multiple transportation modes. It's kind of at this point in time, it's the price of admission, and I don't think that's a surprise there. Going to strategies and tactics here. The question was, how are you preparing for the macroeconomic and regulatory changes? And the large companies are investing in technology, but so are the small ones, to a lesser extent perhaps, but they still are. And offering new services, it's almost neck to neck there, small versus large, but everyone's doing that. Small forwarders, however, you saw some that's almost, over 50% are staying the course. And here we see the large forwarders are venturing out more. Cutting costs, it's up there. It's always a response in these surveys. But I would tell you, most forwarders will tell you at this point in time, you can't save your way to prosperity. And that's you can only cut your cost so much. In terms of the macroeconomic impact and how they're preparing, acquiring and partnering. Large forwarders are doing that. Small, not so much. And of course, it's very small in those deciding to give it up and just selling the company. In terms of primary growth strategy, the question here is, what is the primary way you expect to grow your business? And I don't think this is a big surprise here, but the bottom performers are offering more services to their customers. That's what they want to do. Top performers, not so much, but they still do as well. But it's just the bottom performers are always looking for new ways. And that's if you compare this to 20 or 30 years ago, we'd see little has changed. It's all about meeting the changing market realities, right? I mean, that's pretty much what it's about. The bottom performers want to enter new customer industries. They want it to do new things. And the top performers, they want to work more with the logistics and carrier partners, which is important. I just came back from the CNS conference. Now, granted, they were small and also large performers at that conference, but that conference is all about, it's the International Air Transport Association's U.S. Armed Cargo Network Services, and the large forwarders want to meet with the carriers. And that's what's important. They want to work better with them. Top performers are more predisposed for acquisitions. It's a way to grow. And, of course, entering new geographies, that's always a big area of focus for the large forwarders as well. But I would tell you that acquisition strategies are different for different size entities. But it's just interesting to see that obviously it's one of the primary answers. But we're seeing that more and more right now also. In terms of the e-commerce growth strategy, what is your company doing to capture more of the business-to-business or business-to-consumer e-commerce business? And the large forwarders are obviously changing existing business and processes. They're investing in e-commerce technology. And then you have small companies that don't have, you'll see that the smaller ones don't have as much of a focus. on e-commerce. And we're seeing that, you don't necessarily need in our business to be involved in e-commerce to be successful. It's a new and it's up and coming. A lot of forwarders are involved in it, but some are doing very, very well. A lot are doing very well without actually being right in it. The large ones are, of course. So the other thing is that it requires a retraining of the organization. It's a new set of skills, innovations. We have several members at the Air Forwarders Association that are really diving into it. They're doing it through acquisition. And they're developing specific e-commerce business units. They're becoming large companies, obviously, and you see that as well. But it's a business opportunity. But in the end, the small are really not focused on it. In terms of growth inhibitors, we see this all the time. Large forwarders are always struggling to find skilled talent and customs resources. It's always a concern for them. The smaller companies are in fact tied up in manual processes, and that makes sense because there's usually less money for investment in technology, and obviously, it's all about who can automate and produce efficiencies from that as well. In terms of the greatest inhibitor to growth on IT, obviously the large forwarders see that as more of an inhibitor. The lack of value-added services is something the small forwarders skew towards, and the big thing is the final answer here is access to capital. The access to capital for small forwarders has always been an issue. The large guys have it, but the small folks just don't have the liquidity like the larger performers, and as a result, they just can't take as much financial risk. In terms of tactics to improve margins, the question was, what are the most important tactics you are using to improve your margins? And not surprisingly, the large forwarders are automating processes to react faster to customer needs. And the small forwarders are getting more niche-oriented. They're offering more high-value services. And cutting costs is usually what a small forwarder will tell you. Well, I just got to cut costs. But again, we say this all the time, and it's really true. You can't save your way to prosperity. So that's always a balance between the small and the large forwarders. Providing services further back in the customer supply chain, larger forwarders skewed a little bit higher than that, but both are concerned about that. Raising prices, we've seen that in the past, and quite frankly, the larger forwarders are less apt to do that over the other ones, the smaller ones. So, Glenn, that's how we see it for those two, and I invite the audience to ask and any questions that you all might have. As a matter of fact, I encourage it. Please feel free to do so.
Thanks, Brandon, for taking us through the trends and what are some of the strategies that broker and forwarders are employing to attack those trends. So in our last section here, before we get to the Q&A, we'll go through, some of the technology-specific questions and answers and what that means, since, as Brandon covered, a key strategy to leverage the trends that we're seeing in the industry, overwhelmingly, technology is a part of that. It might be some change management of changing your business, but as he covered in his slides, technology is a key, as you have responded to us, in that's what's going to unlock your strategy. So in diving into that a little bit more, we have a slide here that is year over year, so from last 4 years that we've been doing this. And it shows, I would say, a pretty consistent picture of who you see yourselves in the industry. So we do see we're becoming a little less technologically conservative. A lot of folks see themselves as middle of the pack. So this doesn't, the cut of this data isn't by large or small or top or bottom performer. This just says from all respondents, how do you see yourself as a company? So many of you see yourselves pretty conservatively as middle of the pack, meaning your competitors are doing a lot of things, but so are you. In year over year, we see it pretty consistent. But in those two to the left, early adopter and fast follower, we are seeing that increase, for sure the early adopter, but we're seeing that increase, meaning in that first comment there, we're becoming less technologically conservative. Years ago, it was much more. If you look at 2016, it was overwhelmingly middle of the pack. But we are seeing now that trend of you in this broker forwarder space becoming a little bit more comfortable with saying, you know what, we need to ramp up what we're doing on the technology front. I want to be a market leader, and technology is going to unlock that for me. So we're seeing, even though there's a general trend here of middle of the pack, we are seeing you folks step out as early adopters and fast followers. This next slide takes the same question but cuts it a little bit differently. So how will your IT spend change over the next 2 years? So we see from the year-over-year response that we are definitely on the left side, meaning in terms of overall responses, we're seeing that growth is overwhelmingly the answer, meaning that I will not spend less. I will either spend as much as I'm doing today, or I'm going to accelerate. So this question says, how will it change? And overwhelmingly the response is it's going to go up. So up by what margin? Up 5% or above that, or whether it's 1 to 5% or staying the same. So if your IT spend is X today, most of you are saying, well, it's going to be X plus some certain percentage. That's what we can see there year over year. On the right then, same question, but this cut of data is so telling. Top performers versus bottom performers. What does that tell us? Is that the top performers, again, self-reported, top performers are saying, I need to spend even more than I did in previous years. Bottom performers are a bit more conservative, and that could be because the bottom performer is saying, well, I can't outlay as much capital as a top performer can. Maybe it is that simple, or maybe they're just more conservative in their mindset. Whatever it might be, the key here is that everybody is, or overwhelmingly, people are saying, I'm going to spend, and I'm probably even going to spend more than I did the next 2 years than I have previously. But you can see top performers, they are spending even that much more than the bottom performers. This next question said, how important is technology to your growth and compliance strategies? And we built this question because we see compliance, as Brendan guided us through the first couple ones in terms of trends in the first few slides, that talks about, well, what market trends do you see? Compliance is coming up because of trade wars, because of excise being applied to different commodities from specific origins and so on. So we wanted to see, well, what relationship does that have between a top performer and a bottom performer in terms of growth and compliance? So again, how important is technology to your growth and compliance strategy? So we packed those two into one. So top performers, they are saying that it is fundamental, technology is fundamental and or extremely high for my growth and compliance performance. We start seeing that much less, especially on somewhat and not at all. They were barely blips on the radar for both top and bottom. So you are telling us that technology is very important to growth and compliance strategies. And then we see that trend start getting lower. So fundamental and very high is the tenor of the conversation for top performers for both growth and compliance. And then we see it's highly and then important, the one there in the middle, for bottom performers. So they are less aggressive in terms of how technology is going to lack, even though all of them are saying it's an important or above. And really none of you responded with, well, it's somewhat, and not at all. It's fundamental or high. That's the vast majority of responses. Next question, again, looking forward to the next couple of years, where do you believe is the greatest value from IT over the next 2 years? So if you are going to spend, or not if, sorry, I apologize. So now that you've told us you will spend, what does that mean for your operation? So we see a lot of responses that say, well, I need to address my back office operations. So the core part of your business, call it your ERP, call it your lifeblood, whatever it might be. So from left to right on this was the number of responses. So we saw back office operations are critical, meaning that you still see your staff as a key part of your success, and then your back office operations. Brandon mentioned things like integrations. You're saying, well, I need to integrate, but I need it to be in that fundamental platform that I'm using. So back office operations are very key. In going then into other areas, so people adding value-added services, PO management is always a great example. Broker forwarders are I know in my tenure in this space, I've heard PO management and the various flavors of it year over year. So getting deeper into the supply chain or getting earlier into the supply chain unlocks a lot of benefits later in the supply chain, especially when you think of compliance. If I know what is being ordered and I have visibility to that, my customs broker is much happier when I can tell them a month, 2 months, whatever it might be in advance, and that helps them be more compliant rather than reactive. So things like PO management and shipment visibility are very high in terms of responses. And these, we took top performers in large versus bottom performers in small. And the trend here that you can see is that for each of these answers, they were very, or uncanny almost, at how aligned they were in terms of what the top performers, so most financially successful companies, as well as large-scale companies, what they are focusing on. And let's keep going through. So customer trading and partner carrier integration. So you were saying what is high on my success level is being able to expand my network, expand even my digital footprint with my trading partners, so that when I want to automate, when I want to have additional areas of success in terms of keystrokes saved, better data, more integrity, you see that the digital network is ever expanding. Regulatory compliance, of course, very aligned between the top performers and large. So in this area of where I'm going to spend, it's really consistent all the way across for these two parties. And then the last two, mobile solutions and managing transportation partners, very similar in responses from the top performers in large companies. So where is the IT spend going to be? We see it in expanding your network, expanding your business operations, and fundamentally investing in the core technologies you use in your company that drive your business on a daily basis. Last slide here now, or last question before we get into our summary. Where is the IT investment going to be? Again, top in large performers. So we see that it's again across the board. They're saying I need to spend on that daily operational system. That the terms of value and investment are aligned. So meaning when you invest, you see the value in that investment, and they are interchanged, really. In top performers and large providers, they're slightly more focused on value-added services and integration. So maybe they have already built a platform that can be relied on, and that's the next step in their growth, finding different services or expanding their footprint and really extending the definition of what a traditional forwarder and broker is. So we see that once again, like the previous slide, these are all really aligned, meaning the top performers and large successful companies, they are saying, well, this is what's important to my IT investments over the next 2 years. So let's do a little bit of summary. and then we'll start attacking some of the Q&A. So in summary, and Brandon, I'm going to call out to you a couple times here, so please do be ready. But we definitely see commoditization in this industry. It is an industry that is often looked at as a place to cut in terms of spend. So shippers looking at brokers and forwarders and saying, well, I'm considering switching a provider because something like cost is a main concern of mine. And it's interesting, though, in some of the responses, that might not be totally aligned when you compare that against something like high service. And I'm sure you, as participants of this survey, we can all share stories of folks that have moved to different providers because of cost, and really they sometimes regret that decision because things like high service, depth of service as well, come back into play. And I've seen companies that get back business because it really wasn't about cost, but you can show your value. So a key contributor against commoditization is to show your value, is the inverse of that point. And we see you as broker forwarders doing that. E-commerce, still very much viewed as, well, if I'm small, I really don't even know how to get into that industry, or that's really just something for the big folks that are investing. We have seen use cases, though, where e-commerce and localized niche markets is very prevalent, and we see that all the way from folks that have an eBay store out of their garage to large-scale warehouse operations. So broker forwarders are injecting themselves into that market in providing services, and it might just be warehousing services, or it might be sourcing type services. In some of the responses, we can see that folks are looking, well, where should I source this from? So there are a lot of products out in the market that help you as forwarders in that consultative process to your customers. A third one here, and Brandon, this is where I'm going to call it to you, is customer visibility. We are seeing that so much in this industry. And part of our Evolution conference was really all around how you transform that experience, because that is going to be what makes you a differentiator. So Brandon, I want to get your thoughts on here too, on what you're hearing in the industry about what services you're providing that end customer so they can get visibility into what is going on for the work that you're doing for them.
Yeah. So, look, Glenn, you're probably an Amazon Prime member just like I am. And
absolutely.
When you so when you order something from Amazon, just about the time where you're wondering where it is, you usually get on the online, and you can see it, and now they have a technology that says your widget is 9 stops away from your house. Well, in the forwarding business, we're starting to see that also. That's becoming the threshold for success. You need to have that visibility. Gone are the days where customers are always calling you up on the phone saying, "Where's my shipment?" They want to see it quickly. They want to see it online. At the same time, they don't want to deal with the nitty-gritty details of where it is. They just want a general picture as to when they're going to get it into their hands. So this is not a surprise.
Absolutely, and that's why in that summary we said sometimes less data viewed is even more value. So a lot of times I know, even in my personal tracking of things, that dashboard view of what's coming today, I don't often, or I don't even need to drill into. I'm not sure if FedEx is dropping it off today. I'm not sure if it's USPS. I'm not really sure. I know I can get that data, but I actually find more value in just that high-level dashboard view even of what my service provider is doing for me. So that is tough, though, too. We want to say from the technology side, we hear this all the time. We can provide a lot of different status updates on a shipment, but the value is providing those key milestones to the user, and sometimes not inundating them with all the updates. So unlocking that balance between what you should show them and the value there. That's when we definitely see these digital marketplaces becoming more and more disruptive to the industry. And I think what you'll end up seeing, and even our crafting of this survey in the years to come, that we or the traditional broker forwarder isn't ignoring these freight digital marketplaces. We're even seeing some forwarders, even in our partnerships that we have, we see them saying, well, I need to get into this business as well. I need to find, and I need to buy, or I need to build, or I want to invest in technologies that make me look like a bigger forwarder, even though you know, I don't operate maybe as big of a network as the Ubers of freight, let's call them. So a lot want that presence or that feel, and a lot of this goes into then that customer experience. Brandon, what are your thoughts on that as well?
I would agree with that. You know, a lot of forwarders are even jumping into these platforms as an option and bidding for cargo that way as well. But you know, I got to tell you though, in our business, is that personal relationship still is king, and you know, that's one of the. I think the Ubers of freight are great to have. They're making some inroads. You say they're disrupting. I would say maybe they're enhancing the business, but at the same time, let's not forget the value of those personal relationships.
Absolutely. Great point. We wanted to recap something, and we don't want to gloss over it because we're dealing with people. We're dealing with humans still, even though technology and machines are a fundamental part of what we do. We can't ignore the human factor, as Brandon just mentioned, especially in the areas of serviceability. And finding key talent is absolutely critical. And again, that's what you have told us. This is not something that we're telling you. So you are experiencing this firsthand. And we see a correlation between those that are doing well in this business are finding that talent, or they're telling us through the responses that is a key a business problem that they are actively trying to solve. So finding good talent is always key. We see bottom performers are being asked to do a lot more other services, and that can be great, and that could also maybe stretch you a little bit thin too. And we see the top performers are looking at ways to be niche but profitable. So I think that's that key, to be able to find an area that you can be an expert in, finding talent even that is an expert in that area, and we see that as some growth strategies often, that people, you know, organizations are looking for that people to head up that new area of business, because it is often driven by people, and then people finding the right technology, and then having that implemented well, and then managed throughout the life cycle of that project. So we are absolutely seeing that folks are getting into new areas of the business, but the key is, of course, then making that profitable and making that successful. Brandon, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, it's niche. The small to medium-sized forwarder has always been a niche player, and that's how they've thrived and become successful. Absolutely.
Yep. And lastly here, before we get into the Q&A, some simple math that we'll give in closing, that we see growth, and this is reported by you, so we don't want to propose that we are inventing this, but we do support it. So growth is a combination of investing in technology that is an overwhelmingly major part of your strategy. Finding new initiatives, so finding that new area of business, finding that new person, and then tailoring those services. And that just doesn't mean tangible services, but we're seeing that last part of that bottom point, and even tailored services, making your track and trace, making your portal, making your platform, what your clients see, that you are making that your own, something that nobody else has. So those are the keys to growth. So looking forward, that you're telling us, I need to invest. I need to find the people and initiatives that are going to make me unique, and then the services that I provide, whether that's when somebody picks up a phone and calls my service center, or whether that is when somebody is looking on a portal on their website or on their mobile application, that experience that I give my customer is something that nobody else has. So we can summarize that we see growth as a combination of those things by and large. So we want to thank everybody for joining us. There are a few questions, and if we will take probably the next 7 or so minutes to answer them, and then we will wrap up the call. So the first one is a question that came through that said, you mentioned that forwarders and brokers are automating more processes. That is absolutely true. I would agree with that. How can fundamental services such as HS classification be automated? Classification can be very subjective, so absolutely astute point. And classification, I would say, is subjective, although there are absolute trends that can be relied on. And whether we're talking 6-digit HS or all the way down to the 10-digit HS, I could say we as Descartes, this is really fundamental to a big part of our business in software solutions that we are offering. And you add in things like global compliance. You have a lot of global shippers. They say, well, just this one country isn't my problem. I got a lot of other countries. So the one that made the question is absolutely correct. Because you do need to have solutions to even automate that. So I could say Descartes is very interested in the success of folks that have that type of question, and we're even getting into areas like machine learning and rules-based classification. So the folks that come to us that say, I have all of these different SKUs and they're being shipped to all these different countries. I need things like duty rates. I need landed cost. So this is a great question because this is definitely on our radar. So it's not just having a team of folks ready to classify a particular good based on origin, but it's even able to scale that on a global platform or even have some machine learning applied through some artificial intelligence to look at some of that to be able to then apply that to multiple commodities. Brandon, I got one. I think that's perfect for you. Just reading it over because it is specifically about air freight. So we largely clear air freight. Can you perhaps speak to how the air freight industry is changing? So I'm going to give that one to you.
Well, I got to tell you, this e-commerce thing has caused volumes at airports to surge in some places in excess of 40% over anticipations. And I've been doing some research on e-commerce, and it appears that at this point in time, the trend is the growth rate of e-commerce is in most of these markets is like 26% and growing. So it's pretty high. But right now on air cargo, things are starting to slow down a little bit, and I think that's but it's been a busy couple of years here. In terms of the overall changes, the biggest thing, Glenn, I got to tell you, is automation. We've talked about it, transparency, and with what's coming up. I mean, I want to say, and I said it earlier, it's really true. We are not technology Neanderthals. We've been around technology for a long time, but you're seeing it leveraged in very creative ways now that maybe you didn't see in the past. And government regulations are coming in. ACAS, the Air Cargo Advanced Screening Initiative.
Absolutely.
We've been on this right. We've been on this informed compliance period, but it's becoming mandatory next month. There might be an extension, but even if there's not, that's going to require technology, and they want those data elements in the House Air Bill level as early in the process as possible. So, how that's going to shake out. I was just, as I said, I was down in Miami. I was meeting with the airlines as well as CBP and TSA people down there, and the forwarder compliance right now in terms of direct connecting for ACAS filings is not real high. So that means that the forwarders are going to rely on the airlines to do it. That's not quite the original spirit in which ACAS was intended, but you're not going to be able to fly into the United States with your shipment unless that ACAS filing has been done. So we need as many ways possible for forwarders to participate in that. And then I think finally, you talk about changes. Third-party canines for screening cargo. That's a big change right now. It's going to get it done faster. It's not that we're throwing technology out the door. It's still going to be there at the ready, but it's going to make us more efficient in the screening process. So those are things that come to mind quickly off that question.
Excellent. Thanks, Brandon. So we have just time for probably one more, and we will get out the answers here. We've got a question that came from John, and he asked, where does greater white glove services, excuse me, fall into the survey, higher or lower demand? So I can say, John, that we didn't ask it specifically that way, but whenever we talked about tailored services, you know, those are, for Descartes, those are some of the things that come up, like white glove immediately, you know, comes to mind. When you're doing the delivery, to be able to do that setup or to be able to clear out, and we do this for a very large electronics company, and those white glove services are part of that. In terms of at point of sale, it was one thing years ago just to calculate things like delivery, and it was 8-hour windows, and that was being pushed to 4-hour windows. Now we're getting into 2-hour windows at point of sale in scheduling delivery. Now this is exactly what you mentioned, John. This is a natural extension to something like that, to say, well, do we need to remove a couch? Do we need to remove a television as we bring in the new one? Can we take the boxes with us? You know, so those are absolutely some of the things that come to mind. So I would say that we see that as a service provider, even though that isn't something that everybody in the market is saying I need, we are seeing that demand start coming up as higher priority. So definitely higher priority. So that is a great question, John. Thank you for that. So we are at here the top of the hour. So we want to once again thank everybody for joining. We did have triple-digit response here for the webinar today. So Brandon, once again, thank you very, very much for supporting and having the Air Forwarders Association as part of the benchmark survey, a smashing success again this year, even better than last year. So we thank you for your support and evolution.
Yeah, and Glenn, I want to just also today. Yeah, and I want to thank you for inviting us to participate again. It's always a very worthwhile exercise, and it gives us a good snapshot of what's going on. So I appreciate it. And by the way, just to tell the audience out there, if you're not part of the Air Forwarders Association, please join us to strengthen numbers here in Washington, and we need members. So please make sure you join the Air Forwarders Association.
Thanks, Brandon. So this will conclude our webinar for the 4th Annual Broker Forwarder Benchmark Survey. Take care, everyone.
Take care.